Hello, everybody, and welcome to Where It All Began, my new podcast. This feels a little weird to say because I know there's a million podcasts out there on the internet, and here is one more, but it does feel surreal almost. I've never hosted a podcast before, but I am crazy excited to let you all know what this is about. So before the podcast really begins, I'll share what Where It All Began is all about. So I had an idea a long time ago about middle school. I was 12 or 13 years old. And it was an idea that I had with my mom to create a book. Now, this was the original rough draft of our idea. The original idea was to create a book in which I would interview people in the professional theater industry, interview them, learn about their hometowns, learn about the people that helped inspire them as a kid, fly to their hometown and interview those people. Well, that's a big feat to accomplish. I went to college, I grew up, priorities changed, stuff like that. And the dream kind of got pushed to the side. It was always there, but it was never quite a reality. So despite the fact that I could never really solidify the idea, I never lost the dream because the theater community is such an incredible group of people, regardless of the role that you play, whether it's on stage, off stage, whatever you do, you are part of building that family. So, the goal of this podcast is to interview these guests, have them travel back in time a little bit to the early days of their childhood, who those people were when they first started theater, what got them into theater, who were the people that believed in them, trusted them, and just created a safe space for them. This is going to be a chance for them to kind of walk down memory lane and reminisce on those unsung heroes. Every year when I watch the Tony Awards, people always talk about their agent, their manager, sometimes their voice teacher, and that's about it. I want to hear about the people that believed in them before they got that Tony speech, right? And this is their chance to do that. I also think it's very important to make sure that when I'm asking these guests to be vulnerable and share their life story, that I also share mine. And I'll share a little bit of my story with you guys before we get into interviewing some guests later in the podcast. So, a little bit about me. I truly consider myself to have struck the mother lode when it comes to a kid who likes theater, because Gavin Creel was from my hometown. And if that wasn't lucky enough, my mom is really good friends with his sister. They grew up together, they're still very good friends, and because of their connection, Gavin was brought into my life at a very young age. In middle school, like most boys in middle school, I struggled. Being a kid who liked theater wasn't the quote unquote traditionally manly thing to do, right? And that brought along a lot of struggles. Despite the fact that I had an amazingly supportive family, there were just some days that felt impossible to navigate. I'd walk down the halls and still feel lonely. I was never a part of the popular kids, and sometimes I felt like I was just getting through the day. My goal was simply to get through the day so I could run to my mom's car and escape. My escape was the Fort Finley Playhouse. It was Studio One Dance. It was youth theater because those people were the people who really, truly understood me and didn't care that I liked to dance instead of kick a ball. Those people were the ones that inspired me. Those people were the ones who understood me. Because I'll say it, theater people were a weird bunch. And I don't think anyone's going to deny that at all. It was such an escape from whatever kind of day that I had. And most of them in middle school were not good days. And I still am thankful for those people to this day. But something else happened. There was one day, and I remember it so vividly. Gavin, before he was in the Broadway version of the Book of Mormon, was in a touring production of it. And it was coming somewhat close to my hometown. He had come to our high school to be a guest speaker for the choirs. And I was still in middle school. And so my amazing mother took me out of school, drove me to our high school just so I could see Gavin talk. And I had no clue how much that would change my life forever. When he was talking, when he was singing, whatever he was doing, I hung on to every single word he said. He was kind, he was funny, he was genuine, He was the most amazing person I have ever met. To this day, I mean that. Once he was done talking to the high school kids, he immediately recognized my mom. After the presentation, we went over and we talked to him. And I'm guessing there was some communication between his sister and him because when he looked at me, had no clue who I was, he wrapped me in the biggest hug I'd ever felt at that time. And that hug immediately launched our friendship. Once he took over the role of Elder Price in Book of Mormon, we did get to go see him perform. And was I the only 12-year-old in that audience? Maybe. But hey, we're not going to think too much about that. But that night, we got to go have dinner with Gavin. And that night, like so many others, Gavin and I talked about our struggles, our joys, our fears, our lives, our darknesses, and more importantly, how to battle that. He was such a source of laughter, strength, joy. He was my light at the end of the tunnel. And I hold every interaction, every conversation, every text so close to my heart. And it is these lessons that Gavin taught me that really solidified how it all began. Every time Gavin had the chance to honor someone from his hometown, he did it without hesitation. And it was never to seek accolades. It was never to boost his ego, but it was to show how important it is to remain humble and to know your beginnings and never forget the people that helped us along the way. He took such incredible pride whenever he got to talk about his sixth grade teacher, whenever he got to talk about his high school teachers, whenever he just got to talk about his hometown. And he had no idea what that meant to Little Findlay, Ohio. Truly, he didn't. Tragically, last year, Gavin had passed away. I've cried. I've been mad. I've been in denial. If you were to name an emotion, I'm sure that I felt it. And honestly, I still struggle with it a little bit. But it hit me that if I'm ever going to want to honor who he was, I need to bring myself out of my sorrow and I need to find a way to share his light because that's who Gavin was. He was this effervescent light. And then it hit me. Instead of being sad and wallowing, why not reimagine this idea to have theater people talk about their hometowns? And that's what launched my idea to becoming this. So here we are. I'm launching my podcast to provide a safe space for all theaters of all ages to connect to guests, to understand their journeys, to understand who that sixth grade teacher was, or whoever it might be for them, right? To understand that person who got them, who understood them, and helped them when they were beaten down. I want to help bring those stories to light. I want to bring those stories out of the shadows by traveling back in time with our guests to understand their roots. And I want to hear where it all began for them. Because let's face it, whether you are a six-time Tony Award winning Broadway star or a hometown kid dreaming of being on that Tony stage, we all share a very common love of theater and a very common childhood struggle. And until I heard Gavin's story, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was alone in my challenging theater kid story. And even though my family was immensely supportive and did everything imaginable under the sun to expose me to theater, however it could come about, it was still often a lonely place until Gavin shared his story. And I realized I wasn't alone. And no theater kid is alone. And no theater kid has to be alone because we are all the same kid. We are all the same dreamer who sat in front of our TV watching the Tony year after year after year after year, wanting to hold that award and give a speech. And that's what this podcast is. It is a place where no one has to be alone. It is a place where your dreams can thrive. From a big star to a small town kid and everything in between. We are all one tribe. And I was very lucky to have that connection with Gavin because it saved me. And so it is my mission to connect all of us so we share stories, challenges, inspirations, so no one is ever alone. Now that we've gotten through that, I'm going to share some housekeeping rules with you all. Number one, this is a safe space. You all heard my soapbox that I got on. This is a safe space. You can authentically, unapologetically be whoever you are listening to this podcast because this is a home for you now. No matter what your story is, no matter who you are, welcome home. Number two, this is all done by me. I have my mom and my sisters and my friend Grace help, but everything that you're seeing right now is done by me. This is a pretty little curtain. This is not a brick wall. So if one day this curtain might be a little crooked, no, it's not. It's not. It's perfectly straight, just like me. Okay? If the audio cuts out weird, I'm learning. This is a very big learning curve for me. So just walk a mile. You'll still get the same story. It might just cut weird, okay? So have a little grace, have a little patience while I learn. And number three, and this, I'm going to try and make this be the only time I say this. We'll see. I'll probably lie and say it again sometime. Please, please, please like and subscribe to this podcast. That is the number one way of supporting what I do. When you share this podcast, someone gets to see it and someone gets to find a new home. And in doing so, I get to do more interviews. So the more support that I have from you guys, the more interviews and the more stories I get to share with you. So please, please, please like, follow, subscribe, every social media. I'll link them in the description below. But please, please, please support me in any way that you can. So those are my housekeeping rules. Please stay tuned. We have some amazing guests coming on this podcast. So please stay tuned. Some people that I know, some people that you guys might know, names you might know, some names you might not know. And that's awesome because we still get to share their story and you get to learn about someone new. I cannot tell you how incredibly excited I am for this podcast. So please follow along. I will be having a very special episode coming out after this one releases because I'm traveling back to my hometown because they are putting on a whole weekend tribute to Gavin. Our high school is doing Hello Dolly in his honor. Our youth theater is doing The Wizard of Oz. Our hometown is coming together to support this man. So please tune into that podcast because it is going to be so immensely special. So before you go, like and follow this podcast, and please keep tuning in because from here on out, we get to interview some amazing guests and find out from them where it all began. Bye.